And these matters are psychological issues. They're psychological with the student, but it's also psychological with the parents. With art, everything that we see, whenever we look at advertisements, whenever we go into Thornton's, we're seeing art. We have to get our businesses, our local businesses, on the same line of thought that we're on right now. Having art within Thornton's, having art within the restaurant, letting them know that what we're doing matters and guiding them toward college or guiding them toward furthering their education. I heard the senator talking earlier about a paradigm shift, and that's what we have to do. We're in November. We're doing something called Arts and Business Action Network. I'm heading that up, and I would love to be a part of the research committee here with JCIPS and those that are involved in taking that next step. Again, my name is Terrence Ratton, and I work at the Arts Council of Louisville.
Defer to Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, Kevin. There were 4 areas that we looked at in our session, which were Title I, supplemental education services, No Child Left Behind, and also the charter schools. And how to try to facilitate the session was to focus on the challenges and then identify some things that we could institute regarding the policy. And so I'm just going to hit some highlights of the topics or the ideas that were brought forth to that seemed to get the most discussion. And so one of the challenges with Title I was that it was indicated that the high-risk students were paired with non-qualified or low certified, or if you want to call them poor teachers. And so some of the things that we came up with, number one is as far as the policy goes, is to pair teachers with high seniorities with high-risk students. The other thing was to move from a highly qualified teacher to a highly effective. And the discussion around this was, every teacher is qualified once they're certified, but that does not mean if they're highly effective or not. And so we wanted to move away from looking at highly qualified teachers to highly effective teachers. The other thing was there seems to be a disconnect between the local and federal policy and the conflicts sometimes. And so therefore, something needs to be done as far as the policy goes to have some type of continuity, some type of consistency when it comes to Title I at the federal, state, and also the local level. So that was the Title I. The other was the supplemental education services, and this discussion really surrounded accessibility. And so what we found was that a child who is in need would leave his or her school, but when they went back to their neighborhood, the SES was not there. And so the policy that we looked at, as far as I guess our suggestions would be to have schools in that child's neighborhood to open their doors to that child to have that SES available to him or her. Also, we did talk about, as far as the policy goes, is to complement the classroom with tutors. The question was asked, could SES be a part of the curriculum? I think that was the question, and we said, well, no, we can't do that. That can't be done. So the idea came around, surfaced by saying, well, maybe we can complement that classroom with a tutor for those at-risk students. So that would be a way to incorporate the SES or have the SES for that student. The other was No Child Left Behind, and this really the discussion was about looking at waivers to assist schools with achievement gaps. The other was to use multiple measures for assessing performance and competency. So I think it was combining how the children are currently being assessed, to add some other measures to assess the performance to see whether or not this child is competent or not. And then the last was on the charter schools. And this, I really like this discussion, because we actually start identifying charter schools, I guess, as looking at them as a liquor store on the corner that that you don't want. But anyway, you had to be there. I think the real point that was made here was we're okay with having charter schools, but do not take the money that where schools are not fully funded. Do not take that money and use it for a charter school until these schools that need the funds are fully funded. Afterwards, we can think about, we can talk about this, but let's not take the money that should be used for our schools to put into charter schools. The other was looking at one, all students should be allowed for admittance if charter schools are going to be prominent in our community. And then we talked about all charters should have certified teachers, because right now teachers do not have to have a certain certification in charter schools. I think that's what we identified. And also charters should follow state standards. And all these last three things that I talked about really surrounded, because if we're going to provide money for these charter schools, then there should be some accountability. They should follow the same standards and criteria that other public schools have.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for an excellent summary. Before I invite the discussion leader to add additional comments, Dr. Bernard Hamilton, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the key issues that came up in this segment, especially around Title I and access to SES, because it's good for everybody to know that Title I is a significant investment from the federal government. It's administered through the U.S. Department of Education, and it hits this district in Jefferson County to the tune of almost $38 million annually. So it's a significant investment, and it's aimed at serving a poverty-defined population, which happens to be disproportionately represented by the African-American community. So it hits home from that standpoint. So I wanted to bring that out and ask Dr. Hamilton to reflect some more.
And kind of educating what is and what isn't. And there's a lot of confusion around what's Title I, what's No Child Left Behind, and I'm not going to go through that. If you came yesterday, I tried to do a little bit of that yesterday. But there was a little discussion that you need to understand or be reminded of in the summary, and that the group was pretty much supporting the state's flexibility waiver. I think the participants did understand that, and that has to do with the sanctions and criticism of the persistently low performing schools. There was a lot of discussion about that. There was not a concern about identifying schools that were in need, but there was a concern about sanctions and putting people and trying to embarrass staff for for working as hard as they could. Yes, give them help. Yes, let's make sure we focus on the kids. But if a school does turn itself around and starts in the right direction, then, as I believe the state's waiver will reflect when it goes to the federal government, then let's give that school or that district some breathing room. And so we had a lot of discussion about that, and I want you to understand that the group agreed to that. There was quite a bit of discussion about SES, and that's the tutoring, that's supplemental services. That's for that when a school doesn't meet its goals for a couple of years or whatever the exact number is, that's those parents in that school are eligible for tutoring services from private vendors. And there's lots of questions from those vendors about how the district manages the program versus what the federal allows. We have a large district. We try to manage our district so it works for us. And so we don't know, and so the state has given us a lot of flexibility in how we do that. And there's some disagreements of how that is handled, but there's some suggestions that was articulated and that you will see in their summary that can get to some of that difference between what the feds allow, what the state allow, and what the district allows. There was quite a bit of discussion about this, and you didn't mention this. I think one participant wanted us to, I think Sue's over there. She was saying, he's not going to bring my point. I'm going to bring your point out. What about families and support for families? There's funds provided in Title I for every school for parent involvement, to get parents involved. It's been, that funding mechanism has been there for many years. But it's a little restricted, and some of that might be interpretation, but most of it we interpret it pretty much the way the federal government does. And there has been both at the there are people nationally, like NAPSI, who are trying to get that more flexible, and our group said that needs to be more flexible to help support family involvement. Even the faith-based, get them involved. Just more of kind of using the concept of that our state uses. We have family resource centers, for instance. And there's an act, and I have a copy of it here, and you can go to napsi.org and get a copy of it. There's an act in place now that hasn't been passed that actually suggests that we do that, provide funding to help support families. So there was a lot of discussion about that. There's one little thing that I might mention back to the parent homework issue. We do have a lot of possibilities in Title I that other schools, that other areas don't have. A possible policy issue that we could do for Title I schools, because our district can impose more restrictions on Title I schools because of the funding part. So the research says, and you heard Dr. Harkins quote Pedro Negro yesterday quite a bit. He talked about homework in his discussion when he was trying to do a professional development for the teachers and parents. Homework should be to kids who already have learned the concepts. Parents are not supposed to teach the kids. And because for years we think that's what we're supposed to do, and we can't say, oh, the parents are not there. We really should be sending homework to home that the kids don't know. So we can put policies in place, and we can add that to our list, that does that. So Title I school, for instance, or a policy could be Title I schools, we'll follow the research base. We won't let the SBDM go all over the place. So I want to just add that. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you.
In Louisville for several years, and I am now an independent consultant. Where I took the conversation yesterday draws from the work of Tony Bright and his colleagues out of Chicago. And one of the most important things they've done, I think, it's a book that they wrote about 4 years ago, it was published. It's called Organizing Schools for Improvement, Lessons from Chicago. They identified neighborhoods that they called at-risk neighborhoods. And they're neighborhoods that they have several risk factors that are combined risk factors. And these include church membership, church involvement, number of kids in foster care, poverty, and community cohesion. One of the things that No Child Left Behind did is it took the notion of achievement. They took the notion of poverty and the importance of rural poverty out of the equation when looking at achievement. And what they have discovered in their research is there are certain neighborhoods where there have to be very creative partnerships and systemic linkages along with economic revitalization. You have to rebuild communities up from the ground, and you have to rebuild relationship. And it has to be a systemic community effort, and we can no longer pretend that that doesn't matter.
Lewis, and I'm a business owner, Entity First, but I headed a counseling advising unit at U of L for 25 years for underprepared freshmen. to respond to a number of the different groups here, particularly some of the other things we got from student achievement. One of the studies by Kenneth Clark, who did the Brown versus Board of Education study that made the difference, he did other work in 1960s. And what he found was the attitudes of teachers as expressed in their behaviors in the classroom in first grade, whether someone asked them to help erase the board or put out the graham crackers or help with anything else, or how they criticized. By the second grade, often people, the children who were affected by the unknown sometimes bias of that teacher, had decided by second grade whether they were capable of learning or not. Now, that's a motivation factor, and that's often a difficult thing to get at. My master's is in counseling. It's always the difficult thing to say, did you do what you thought you could do? But we incorporated a lot of things that had to do with motivation with college freshmen. However, something known like that could be incorporated at the post-secondary level in teacher education. Emphasize that cultural competency could be dealt with beneficially at teacher education at the post-secondary level to address that fact. Another thing that we dealt with in student achievement, and we've talked about this in a number of different cases, was parental involvement or engagement. One of the at-risk factors is first-generation college students. Well, we have to realize a lot of parents, when they're in at-risk communities, neighborhoods, are at risk for having ever been very successful or known how to succeed in K through 12. And they may need training, and they may need information of how to engage help with the school or understanding the school system. And that was one of the things we talked about in student achievement, was parental workshops, and possibly inclusive with teachers, and have them together. But the parental workshop, the cross-cultural competency, I heard that some people said teachers were hesitant to provide something that says that might be white guilt. So much of that training is in diversity training. Rita Starr talks about prejudice. A lot of white folks need that training to know that they have things they don't know, that they get and internalize. Well, the kids internalize this all of the time. So that maybe that's a policy that needs to be done, whether it goes beyond teacher comfort levels or not, is to understand that awareness of what your own biases, unknown may be. So the teacher training, the parent workshops, we were talking that some people in the school system didn't know the requirements or policies at schools. Well, if they don't know, how much more a parent that's not even involved in that institutionalization of things is going to engage the system in advocacy for their own child, how it works. So that parental workshop may be a very critical issue. The other thing I heard was within neighborhoods, that we heard someone talk about Ballard has a workshop or a training thing that goes from Ballard to Beecher, that goes to Beecher Terrace. If we know some of those at-risk neighborhoods, maybe they don't all go to the same school, but a workshop could be held to talk about the general school policies and interactions. Those are some things that I think could be critical, because these are maybe first generation wanting their kids to be successful, but maybe they don't know about it, and can give them some hints. Finally, if nobody knows, we did have a 25-year program that was one of the top 10 in the country at U of L for helping underprepared freshmen succeed at a four-year institution. The policy from the legislature in Kentucky passed a law that said those students can no longer start at a four-year institution. Now, no one ever asked about the research, but actually a lot of the research indicated that those that want a four-year degree do best if they start at a four-year institution. But that question was not asked at the time. Now, that's not a, intuitively people thought that was correct. But if not, we need to know that wherever kids are, when they're ready to start college, you need something there. We developed over 20 years of assessment and research interventions that worked within, Dr. Hudson was associate director of that program for a long time, an enrollment unit. With an 8-year longitudinal study, he showed that within 2%, as many of our students graduated in as broad a range of majors as those admitted in good standing. Now, the graduation rate at U of L still wasn't great at that point. So I'm not, I don't want to mislead everybody on that. But it showed that we helped them get up to speed. And a lot of what we did with interventions was not just academic skill. It was a combination of self-motivation, of what parents weren't able to teach their, they were first-generation college students, down to counseling that says, you need to make sure you're along with some friendship that want your same goals. You don't have to give up the friends you've had, but you may need to get others for your support system too. So it's a combination of motivation, of skills that they might not have learned before, but time management, professor types, and parents can use that of how to interact with the school system and help their kids do better.
Okay, thank you for the excellent commentary. A quick 23 minutes. At this rate, we're behind schedule. We've got 2 more policy strands to go through. I'm going to ask for a show of hands if you could go another 15, maybe 30 minutes. The depth of
Akron Virgin rental workshops. I can talk a little bit about what we're doing right now. Chris Rashid talked about the Street Academy. Street Academy has 3 parental workshops that's required by parents that have students. And so the first workshop is going to be on December the 10th at Portland Elementary School. We used to be located at Wheatley, we're now at Portland. We invite all parents, people who are involved with parents to come to that. This is supported by Title I, and so that's December the 10th at 1 o'clock at Portland Elementary School. The next point I want to make is that Dr. McMillan worked with us very closely. The school district worked with the Black Family Conference each year. We're still working with them, and we got them to agree to put on a pre-conference parent institute before the Black Family Conference. So this next year, when the Black Family Conference starts, March 8th, 2012, we're going to have an all-day parental workshop. And we're in the process now talking with key organizations, and I would like to talk to the organizations that are here today to be involved in that, so we can get. And is also supported by Title I. The next piece I want to talk about is coaches. All right. Now I've been here. I wasn't able to be here yesterday because we were running an Institute for Cultural Competence. It was the last day. But one of the things that I'd like to see in the next gathering, or one of the gatherings that we put together, is that we convene a panel of coaches to begin to talk about, because as we're sitting here right now, the kids who are in that achievement gap are out there playing ball. Yep. All right. Amen. And they, the coaches are not holding them accountable. All right. And this is one of the dreams of Dr. McMillan. He wanted to have a citywide meeting of all the coaches to talk about this issue of achievement, and allowing the students to, or give the students some kind of accountability too, before they get on the field or before they get on the court. So I just want to point that out, that we really do need to have the coaches here. All right. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is neighborhood schools. Right? People say neighborhood schools. I would like to suggest that we change that to maybe looking at, especially as we begin to look at the school assignment plan, and as to look at the concept of community schools. All right? Because when you say neighborhood schools, the neighborhood school will close at 2, 3, 4, and that's it. Community schools stay open longer. So if we're talking about more time on task, all right, community schools is the term that we should be using. So as we develop a new school assignment plan, we look at where we could strategically place community schools, all right? And that also deals with another issue, which would be adult education, because community schools address adult education as well. So the last thing that I want to say is we need to do research on the charter schools, all right? Now, we've been talking about this in the district, and in fact, several years ago, we wanted to send a team up, community representation as well, to Chicago to look at how charter schools are run. In Chicago, they have charter schools that have principal, a elementary school principal, a middle school principal, and a high school principal, and a superintendent, but they're still accountable to the Chicago Public Schools, all right? How does that work? We need to send a team up and find out, right? So I just wanted to make those points.
Excellent point, thank you. What we're going to do, I'm going to be having dialogue about it. In fact, AAI doesn't take a stand for or against anything except effective versus ineffective or destructive policy. So I just want to say that. But we want to go to our next track, which is health and wellness. The facilitation was led by Anthony Smith. So Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Kevin. Dr. Sandra Brooks actually was the policy leader for this conversation. And I'm going to try to make this brief because a lot of the points that were made by the other folks actually tie into what we talked about, but it deals more with the health and wellness. And one of the things that Dr. Brooks did say loud and clear and the group agreed with is that if young folks are not prepared and healthy when they come to school, then they're not going to be successful in the classroom either. So making sure kids are connected to health and they're healthy as they come into the school and as they stay in the school was really important. So a couple of key points that we did talk about was, and one of the things that Dr. Brooks was able to do for us as well is that as we put out policy suggestions to tell us that that stuff was already in place. So one of the things we realized as a group, we were small but mighty. There was about 4 or 5 of us in the room, but what we realized is that there's more education that needs to be had around what's going on around policy, especially when it deals with health and wellness for young folks and especially young folks of color. So one of the things we did talk a whole lot about was, as we look at the schools around their testing and grades and stuff like that, what would it look like to put together a health report for the school as well, looking at the BMI of the school, not just the kids, but the teachers as well, looking at what they serve in the school as well. Schools would get graded and incentivized to do better around their activity, making sure kids are active, making sure kids are eating well and stuff like that. And one of the suggestions that were made also is, what would it look like for classrooms and teachers just to have bowls of fruit and stuff on their desks under this, and then you would just have this report card that each school would get each year based on how healthy the school is. And that's everybody that's engaged in the school. And another thing we talked about, I think it was just mentioned, around community schools. How do you open up the school after hours so that kids can go in there, not those who play football, basketball, or team sports, but those who just want to come and participate in activities at school with their parents, right? So I think part of the conversation we had too was that if kids are active after school, how do they track that and then be able to turn that in for extra credit or some kind of, at the end of the year party that they participated in, but then also saying that your parents have to participate with you as well, so that if I'm doing it, I'm going to do that thing that kids do to you all the time, is really push you to do things that you don't want to do because they know they're going to get credit for it. So if they're going to pressure you to be active with them, so how do you make this a family event, but then as kids turn that stuff in, they get credit for that or they get recognition for that. So we were really saying we want to recognize all kids kind of activity, not just the major activity, but the walking on the Mayor's Mile, the going to the park, the riding the bike and stuff like that with your parents. So really just looking at the whole system of the school and saying that if your kids are active and participating and eating better, then you get credit for that as a school system, and then just looked at as a part of your whole, process of being the kind of schools that we want to have. And then we also talked a lot about, when we were talking about policies and access to healthy foods, looking at the healthy and the hairy model that's already happening, the corner stores that are going on. How do you get more of those into the community and stuff like that so that folks have access to, but not just access to food, but then also how do you educate folks on different fruits, different vegetables, how you use them, how you cook them, why they're important. And we know that we're not going to stop eating chips and stop eating Snicker bars, but how do you add an apple into this process as well so that kids grow up all the time knowing that it's there? So we did a lot of conversation around that, but then also saying, what would it look like to have, because I don't know anymore if there's nurses at school on a day-to-day. I don't know if that's the process anymore, but also how do you tie all of that together, like having a medical navigator, I think is what Dr. Brooks was saying that Norton's has, that actually goes out into the community and does some education in the community and tying all of that back together. So I think a lot of the conversation was around partnerships, right? How do you make sure that the community, the parents, the school, and the medical providers are all connected to each other so that folks all know what's going on with the young the kids around their health and stuff like that. So that was a bulk of our conversation. And I know I see Shamika back there who's with us in the room, if she wants to add any more to it.
No, I think you did a great
Oh,
job.
hold on just 1 second. Then also, I have had my phone out and I'm not actually doing text messages or anything. I'm actually tweeting. So when Senator Neal was talking about how do we do this thing, and I think the young lady up there said as well, because if you look at the room, there's not a lot of young people in here, but we do have a lot of young people who would be interested in being here. And Twitter, social media, any of that stuff is real time where folks get it. And when you talk about putting policy papers and videos and all that stuff out, you can link all of that stuff out and get it out real quick. So 140 words, carriages can be very, very powerful, because I know there's 2 people in here that I'm tweeting back and forth with today that's talking about what's going on in this room. So for me, I think, you know, if you really want to get this message out and you really want folks engaged, social media is the way to go. And so I just wanted to say that. So thank you. My tag is ANTS 012369. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Just remember that I need to pop your notes on the board here.
Okay.
One
I
is,
just go back and put more stuff to those.
okay,
I'll get that.
so you got it all covered. Sure.
I just want to say that you got here in Jefferson County, you have 2 magnets, elementary magnets that are health and fitness, and they have a parent engagement section. They're supported by Humana Foundation, and our organization works with them too to provide the parent impact. And I would suggest, and they're headed by 2 African-American principals. So what I would suggest is that we learn something from what they are learning, because this is the 3rd year that they have been in existence.
And those schools again are,
Wellington and Rangeland.
okay. Okay, excellent. We're gonna go to the back and then to the lady in brown next, Wes.
Associate Dean of Students here at Jefferson Community and Technical College. And I just wanted to make a general comment regarding the issues and policies regarding post-secondary education and remediation. And one of the things that I would do is share this data with the policy panel so that they can have that as they begin to look at data and make their analysis. But we have data that shows and supports the success rates of students that start at Jefferson and need remediation. Majority of the students that come to us that need remediation needed in at least 1 category, and the 3 categories are math, English, and reading. But we can provide, I can't provide that data to AAI that would show those students do go on to the state 4-year institutions and transfer out of state as well and are successful. The other information that I will also share would be regarding the legislative policies that we are under to improve the transfer rate of our students. One of the bills that passed last year, the students who take classes here at Jefferson, those credits are aligned, the general education core is aligned with the state 4-year colleges. So those students can leave here, if they leave here with only the core requirement for general education, they transfer into the state schools at the 3-year level. So those college credits that they earn here will transfer. But I think that's really important, that that's something that this body understands and knows, that as a community college, we are under mandates from the state to not only provide this education to these students who can't get into the 4-year colleges without the remediation. We are the way that they can then continue their education. But one of the things that I will do is provide this information to AAI so that you can have it as you begin to do your work.
Thank you, thank you.
I guess the first thing is, I guess, about kids not eating at school, and mainly when I think they fly under the radar, especially just because I work with this population, homeless kids. Under McKinney-Vento, they should get lunch, but it might be a situation where the parent